過去呢幾個月，通脹同埋加息喺投資界已經係成為一個非常之熱門嘅話題啊！美國最近喺12月份公布嘅通脹數據已經係達到7%，係自1982年嚟上升得最高嘅一年。面對住咁高嘅通脹，美國聯儲局預期會喺今年加息3至到4次，而有部分嘅投資銀行更加係估計聯儲局會喺今年加息7次添。雖然加息就唔代表住股票市場一定係表現得特別差嘅，不過相比起過往嘅低息環境嘅情況，咁嚟緊嘅加息唔多唔少都會對股市短期內都會有一定嘅負面影響嘅。呢次聯儲局加息嘅預期都令唔少嘅投資者擔心，過去股票市場嘅持續升勢係唔係已經完結，而即將進入一個熊市嘅。而就住美國目前高通脹嘅情況，各大財經媒體無時無刻都會轟炸好多有關嘅負面消息啊！而呢啲嘅報導當然都會令到散戶投資者係更加之恐慌嘅。所以過去呢幾個星期我都有不斷去研究一啲可以受惠到加息嘅股票板塊同埋投資機會啊！就例如早前就出過片提及過一啲受惠到加息嘅銀行板塊，以至係一啲石油嘅板塊同埋黃金、貴金屬嘅投資機會，都係一啲對抗通脹同埋加息嘅投資策略嘅。不過喺我做呢個資料搜集嘅時候就無意中揾到美國投資界傳奇人物 Peter Lynch 對於通脹嘅睇法。我認為都值得大家去到做一個參考嘅。所以我就抽咗幾段精華同大家去做分享嘅。
No one can predict the stock market. They try to predict the interest rates. I mean, if anybody would predict the interest rates right 3 times in a row, they'd be a billionaire. Considering there's not that many billionaires on the planet, it's very, I had logics, I had a syllogism and studied these when I was at Boston College. There can't be that many people who can predict interest rates because there'd be lots of billionaires. And no one can predict the economy. I had a lot of people in this room were around in 1981 and 82 when we had a 20% prime rate, with double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment. I don't remember anybody telling me in 1981 about it. I didn't read, I studied all this stuff. I don't remember anybody telling me we're going to have the worst recession since the Depression. So what I'm trying to tell you, it'd be very useful to know what the stock market's going to do. It'd be terrific to know that the Dow Jones average a year from now would be X, that we're going to have a full-scale recession, or interest rate's going to be 12%. That's useful stuff. You never know it, though. You just don't get to learn it. So I've always said, if you spend 14 minutes a year on economics, you've wasted 12 minutes. And I really believe that.
Peter Lynch 喺佢嘅演講就提到，去到嘗試預測股票市場嘅走勢，同埋嚟緊聯儲局幾時加息嘅意義實際上係唔大嘅。原因係因為冇人係可以準確預測股票市場嘅走勢同埋利率嘅變化嘅。Peter Lynch 就用到1981年嘅例子去到嘗試去到解釋佢嘅觀點啊。當時1981年美國聯儲局係為咗控制通脹，都曾經係加息至到接近20%。不過回顧返美國 S&P 500指數，到今日已經係升到去4500點㗎啦。所以通脹同埋加息嘅問題，對於股市長遠嘅發展係冇任何嘅影響嘅。雖然係咁，嚟到今時今日，投資者對於通脹同埋加息嘅話題依然係非常之緊張。所以就希望透過 Peter Lynch 嘅演講去到話俾大家知，其實實際上呢一個問題投資者係唔需要太過擔心嘅。既然當時1981年聯儲局大幅加息，對於股市長遠嘅影響有限，所以相信呢一次加息都唔會係例外啊。
Alan Greenspan is a very honest guy. He would tell you that he can't predict interest rates. He could tell you what short rates are going to do in the next 6 months. Try and stick them on what the long-term rate will be 3 years from now. They'll say, I don't have any idea. So how are you, the investor, supposed to predict interest rates if the head of the Federal Reserve can't do it? So I think that's, but you should study history, and history is the important thing you learn from. What you learn from history is the market goes down. It goes down a lot. The math is simple. There's been 93 years a century. This is easy to do. The market's had 50 declines of 10% or more. So 50 declines in 93 years. About once every 2 years, the market falls 10%. We call that a correction. That's That's a euphemism for losing a lot of money rapidly, but we call it a correction. And so 50 declines in 93 years, about once every 2 years the market falls 10%. Of those 50 declines, 15 have been 25% or more. That's known as a bear market. We've had 15 declines in 93 years. So every 6 years, the market's going to have a 25% decline. That's all you need to know. You need to know the market's going to go down sometime. If you're not ready for that, you shouldn't own stocks. And it's good when it happens. If you like a stock at 14 and it goes to 6, that's great. You understand the company, you look at the balance sheet and they're doing fine, and you're hoping to get to 22 with it. 14 to 22 is terrific, 6 to 22 is exceptional. So you take advantage of these declines. They're going to happen. No one knows when they're going to happen.
咁如果你仲係好擔心加息同埋通脹對於股票市場帶嚟嘅影響，咁你應該啦，再要係重複睇多幾次 Peter Lynch 嘅演講啊。係冇錯，嚟緊通脹可能有機會係升到去到15%，令到股市係大跌30%，但係亦可能通脹嘅情況係冇市場想象中咁嚴重啊。我想講嘅係，雖然依家股票市場嘅氣氛就好差啦，而有唔少嘅經濟學家都話嚟緊股市將會係大跌啊。不過實際上冇人係可以好精準咁樣預測到嚟緊股票市場嘅走勢，所以作為一個長線嘅投資者，我哋係要保持一個平常心，唔好受到市場嘅負面情緒而係影響到嘅。相反，我哋係要接受股票市場咧係會有上有落，而有時候咧我哋係避免唔到一啲突如其來嘅大跌市嘅。就例如早喺2020年疫情大爆發，就令到美股大跌30%。而我相信喺疫情之前，我相信冇一個投資者係可以預測到呢件事會係發生嘅。咁所以喺買股票之前，投資者一定要有心理準備，股票市場都會係有回調嘅時候啊。只要你明白呢一個道理，用一個長線嘅投資思維去到投資喺呢個股票市場，咁其實喺你個投資路上已經係成功咗一大半㗎啦。
The market's going to be a lot higher in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Trying to predict the market is really a waste. I don't know what it's going to do, but over the long term, the upside is more than the downside. So you're going to say to yourself, do I need the money in the next month? Do I need the money in the next year? Do I have kids going to college? Do I have a wedding coming up? Then you're a bad investor. If you can keep putting money in, you have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 year, you should do well.
呢一段影片再一次強調，冇人係可以預測到股票市場嘅走勢，而就因為咁，作為一個投資者，你就唔應該將一啲短期需要用到嘅錢攞去投資喺個股票市場身上。因為假如短期內個市係有乜嘢負面嘅消息，而令到股市下跌，而你係需要急住用錢嘅話，你就要係逼住喺低位賣出。不過，假如你係用緊一啲嘅閒錢去到投資喺呢個股票市場，而就算短期內遇到一啲負面嘅消息，令到股票市場大跌都好，你都有係足夠嘅時間去到俾市場恢復翻之前嘅失地，就唔好俾市場影響到你嘅長線投資思維。用一個10年、20年甚至係30年嘅投資年期去到慢慢累積財富，咁我相信你嘅投資回報會係相當之唔錯嘅。對於大部分嘅投資者嚟講，我認為用一個月供嘅方式，定期每個月以一個長線嘅角度投資喺一啲 S&P 500大盤指數嘅 ETF， 趁住美股最近嘅回調去到趁低吸納，會係一個唔錯嘅投資選擇。投資喺頭500大嘅美國公司股票，可以做到一個分散投資嘅效果，令到你係可以輕輕鬆鬆享受整體美國股票市場嘅升幅。今日嘅分享就差唔多啦。最後，如果大家係有興趣去到了解我自己私人嘅投資組合同埋我最新嘅投資部署，都歡迎大家去到 join 我嘅 Patreon 去攞更加多獨家嘅資訊嘅。詳細嘅資料可以去翻下邊嘅 description 去到參考翻嘅。多謝大家收睇啊！希望大家係可以 like 我條片啦 ，subscribe 我嘅 YouTube channel， 同埋 follow 我嘅 IG 同埋 Facebook account。好，今集時間差唔多啦，下集繼續和你賺。